Hi guys, and welcome back to part 2 of our proper cool down and stretching series. This series is going to focus on hip and low back mobility. So this is going to be a great routine to capitalize on if you have both hip and low back issues, or if you just finished a gnarly leg day programmed by one of your Audacious Athlete coaches. Before we dive right in, I want to remind you guys of the key point that we always have to remember in a proper cool down or mobility or stretching series is that we do have to wait to bring our heart down to the ground until our heart rate comes down. So with any of these routines, you'll notice that I do keep your heart elevated at all times prior to getting down on the ground. So be sure before you personally do any of the movements that do require your head to be below your heart, that your heart rate has come to a steady place. For every person, this is very individual. For me personally, anytime my heart rate goes below around 100 beats per minute is indicative of me being able to kind of lay onto the ground without any negative side effects. And for you, that might look different. So just be sure that you know where your personal threshold is for where you could get kind of lightheaded or dizzy just by being on the ground after a training session. So let's go ahead and get into these movements. So first up, we have an elevated pigeon pose. So I construct this pigeon pose with my favorite piece, one of my favorite pieces of equipment in the gym, which is these like jazzercise slash step platforms where you can change and put a different risers in for the height at which you need for your particular hip mobility and flexibility. I also typically use some sort of pad, yoga mat. You'll see that I've got a little square pad here with this. And then once I get my hip elevated to where I feel that good stretch within the back of my glute, low back, and hip, then I kind of utilize a wall or some sort of surface to kind of get a fuller extension in my back. I'm able to kind of elongate my spine and essentially just really hold this position and kind of relax and fall into the wall. The second movement is a seated spinal twist. So this seated spinal twist, you just want to elongate one leg and then you want to wrap the other leg over on top of the other one, and you want to try to get your foot as flat as possible next to that knee slash thigh area. And when you counter twist, you want to drive the opposite elbow over to that knee that is positioned up higher, and you want to be able to kind of turn your back, and as you deep breath in and take a breath out, you should be able to make that spinal twist just a little bit tighter. So I always say breathe in, and as you breathe out, try to rotate that spine just a little bit further from the starting position, and slowly you'll start to kind of inch and open up that lower lumbar and lower spine. Number 3 is a seated figure 4. So the seated figure 4 is bringing now that leg up over the thigh, and you're going to bring that thigh in closer to the body. So you're going to essentially be kind of in a 4 position, and you want to keep that foot planted firmly on the ground. You'll notice because of my shoes, my foot's kind of sliding out a little bit. But slowly as you breathe, you want to push and force just slight amount of weight on that knee so you can kind of open up that hip. And again, this is assisted by you. So this is essentially a self-assisted stretch with that knee to just kind of position your hand with a light pressure against that. I would say the seated figure 4 is one of my most challenging positions for my hip to be in, just due to my injury. So you'll kind of notice me riding the struggle bus with this one a little bit, just because I cannot get to that full hip extension position that you need in order to be able to get fully into this position. So do apologize, but still, I promise you I feel it through my IT band and definitely through my low back and external and outside of my hip. Number 4 is more of a dynamic movement now that we've done a couple more static holds, and it is just a hip rotation that I practice. I also do this pretty frequently in a warm-up as well, and I'm just shifting my hips and knee joints side to side, just kind of opening them up as we've done more static holds. And this is prior to going into, again, one of my more challenging and more compromised positions, which is a seated hamstring slash abductor stretch, and I use a stability ball for this one to be able to work for my body and for my positioning. For people who have really, really great low lumbar flexibility, they will be awesome at this movement. Or if you have really tight hamstrings or tight adductors, you'll probably kind of be in that struggle bus with this movement like I am. But I will tell you that this stability ball really helps me elongate my spine and kind of roll my body out and get to a more relaxed position. If I was just to try to hold myself out there, I don't actually get to breathe and relax in the position. And that's the most important thing about stretching, is actually getting into that relaxed state where there's tension, but tension in a good way, and it's tension you're actually able to breathe through. That's something that I learned from Yin Yoga, is that you want to utilize props, you want to utilize things that lift the ground or grow the ground up to wherever it is to meet you where you need to be met. And that's something that I've learned with utilizing yoga blocks, things like stability balls, or in this case, you'll see me kind of utilize just like even a pad underneath my hip to help with the support. So again, remember to grow the ground to meet you where you need to be met. And that's a really, really good takeaway from this particular stretch and mobility series, is utilizing props. So now we're gonna move down into the ground here, and I'm just doing a lying leg hip stretch. So we're just gonna be bringing opposite leg over to opposite side of the body, and you wanna still face the opposite direction of the knee. That's just a good spinal stretch here. And again, you wanna always make sure that your heart rate has dropped down to a comfortable level for you to get down into the ground position. In this particular spinal stretch from the ground, I also want you to remember that the same principle still applies. You want to breathe through the movement, and as you exhale, you want to be able to twist a little bit further into the actual movement itself and twist a little bit deeper and try to keep your shoulder blades attached to that floor behind you. Last and final movement is a full expression of the pigeon pose. The pigeon pose is one of my least favorite positions in yoga. However, it's one of the most beneficial positions, I feel, for opening up your hips and really extending your lower lumbar spine and getting that low back really stretched. So you'll see that I still am utilizing the foam roller as kind of a yoga block or support to bring the ground up to meet my hip, just so I can get as relaxed in this position as possible. Others might be able to get their hip to fully lengthen and really fall into the ground. I am not one of those individuals, and you likely may not be either. It's a very rare individual who can sit in a pigeon pose position very comfortably without the ground being met to them. I've gotten a lot closer, and I'm able to just use this foam roller as well. You might even need to start off with something just a little bit higher. I think I started off with even 2 yoga blocks in my first yoga class. This particular position, you should be able to get relaxed and put your forehead down into your hands and just kind of breathe while you're in this position as much as possible. All right, Audacious Athlete crew members, this concludes part 2 of our proper cool down and mobility routine, focusing on the hips and low back. Next up is going to be part 3, where we focus on your quads and hamstrings exclusively. So stay tuned for that. If you guys have any suggestions for where you want our next coaching series to go, please leave them in the comment section below, and we will see you guys for part 3.